A mama dog begs for help for her puppies, and when rescuers follow her, they can't stop crying. At first, it seems like just another abandoned stray, until she does something no one's ever seen before. She doesn't run, she leads, deep into the woods, to a place no one was supposed to find. What they discover there shocks even the most hardened rescuers, because this mother didn't just escape something terrible, she escaped it for them. But the deeper they dig, the darker the truth becomes. Who hurt her? Why were they hidden? And how far will she go to protect her babies? What happened to this dog? And why does exposing the truth put everyone in danger? Your presence here is powerful. In a world full of noise, it's the quiet gestures of compassion that truly stand out. If your heart still makes room for kindness, you're already one of us. Through the biting cold of the Tennessee night, Margot Elridge stood at the front gate of Hope's Haven Animal Rescue, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. The security lights cast long shadows across the gravel driveway, and her hands were buried deep in the pockets of her worn denim jacket. Something had woken her from her light sleep in the shelter's small office, a sound she couldn't quite place. That's when she saw it. A dark shape materialized from the shadows, moving with painful slowness toward the gate. As it stepped into the light, Margot's heart clenched. It was a German shepherd, but one in terrible condition. The dog's ribs showed clearly through patches of missing fur, and angry scars crisscrossed its body. Most disturbing was the deep groove around its neck, the unmistakable mark of a chain worn too tight for too long. "Hey there," Margot called softly, keeping her voice gentle and even. "It's okay, girl. You're safe now." The dog's ears perked forward, and despite her obvious exhaustion, she approached the gate with purpose. Margot noticed something odd about the way the shepherd moved, not like a stray seeking shelter, but like she was on a mission. Margot carefully opened the gate, ready to guide the dog toward the intake area. But instead of coming inside, the shepherd grabbed Margot's pant leg with careful teeth and tugged. When Margot didn't move immediately, the dog let go and took several steps away, looking back with unmistakable urgency in her eyes. "You want me to follow you?" Margot asked, already reaching for the emergency kit she kept by the door. Something in the dog's behavior set off every instinct from her years as a trauma nurse. This wasn't a random stray. This dog needed help with something specific. The shepherd turned and began trotting into the darkness, pausing every few steps to make sure Margot was following. They pushed through thick brush, branches catching at Margot's clothes as they ventured deeper into the woods. The temperature seemed to drop with every step, and Margot's fingers were growing numb despite her gloves. After what felt like forever, they emerged into a small clearing near the creek. The shepherd made a beeline for what looked like an old canoe, flipped upside down and half buried in leaves. As Margot approached, she heard it, tiny weak whimpers coming from underneath. "Oh God!" Margot breathed, dropping to her knees. She carefully lifted one edge of the canoe, and her heart nearly stopped at what she found. 6 tiny puppies were huddled together in a desperate pile, their little bodies shaking violently from cold and fear. One of them, a small black and tan pup, had a nasty gash on its side that was still oozing blood. The mother dog, for there was no doubt now that these were her puppies, nosed at the injured one, whining softly. The sound held such profound worry and love that Margot felt tears spring to her eyes. "It's okay, sweet girl," Margot whispered, already pulling out her phone. "We're going to help them. I promise." Her fingers shook as she dialed the shelter's emergency number. "Sarah? Get the clinic ready and wake up, doctor. Martinez, I need help out here now. Bring the transport van and follow my GPS location. We've got 6 critical puppies and their mother." While she waited for backup, Margot began assessing the puppies with practiced efficiency. They were severely malnourished, their little bellies swollen from what was likely a heavy parasite load. The injured pup needed immediate attention, but they all showed signs of neglect and exposure. The mother dog watched every move Margot made, her eyes never leaving her babies. "You did so good," Margot told her, reaching out slowly to stroke the dog's head. "You're such a brave girl, getting help for your babies." The shepherd leaned into Margot's touch, just slightly, before returning her attention to the puppies. Despite her own obvious injuries and exhaustion, she remained focused entirely on her children's welfare. When the shelter van's headlights finally cut through the darkness, Margot had never been so relieved to see backup arrive. Sarah and Dr. Martinez worked quickly but gently, helping to transfer the puppies into warm transport carriers. The mother dog supervised every movement, her worry evident, but her trust in their help clear. Back at the clinic, as the team worked to stabilize the puppies, the shepherd refused to leave the examination room. She stood sentinel beside the table where Dr. Martinez was treating her injured pup, her eyes following every movement of the doctor's hands. "She's remarkable," Dr. Martinez said quietly to Margot. "Most dogs in her condition would be too traumatized to trust humans at all. But she knew exactly where to go for help, and she's letting us treat her puppies without any resistance. This isn't just any stray. This dog has training." Margot nodded, watching as the mother dog gently nuzzled each puppy in turn. "She's special, that's for sure. And something tells me there's more to her story than we know." Margot watched as her team worked through the night, administering warm fluids and antibiotics to the 6 tiny puppies. The smallest one, barely bigger than her hand, fought against the 4th line, while its mother, whom they'd started calling Calypso, pressed her nose against the examination table, whimpering softly. "Easy there, little fighter," Jenny whispered, adjusting the line. "Almost done." When Tom, their night security guard, entered the treatment room with his deep voice booming, "How are they doing?" Calypso's reaction was immediate and severe. She scrambled backward, her nails scraping against the linoleum floor, and wedged herself between the wall and a metal cabinet. Her body trembled violently, eyes wide with terror. "Tom, could you step out, please?" Margot asked quietly, noting the dog's behavior. She approached Calypso slowly, speaking in soft, reassuring tones. "It's okay, girl. You're safe here." The German shepherd's reaction wasn't that of a feral dog. This was learned trauma. As Margot got closer, she noticed more details about Calypso's condition. Beyond the obvious malnutrition and patchy fur, there was a deep, permanent groove around her neck, the kind that only came from a chain worn for years, the cutting into flesh until it scarred. When Margot reached to examine it, Calypso allowed the touch but kept her eyes fixed on the door where Tom had appeared. "Jenny," Margot called softly, "come look at this." She pointed out the scarring, then gestured to other marks across Calypso's body. "These aren't random injuries. Someone kept her chained up, probably in some kind of outdoor setup." Jenny frowned, gently parting Calypso's fur to reveal more scars. "Should we call animal control? This is clearly abuse." "I already tried," Margot sighed, frustration evident in her voice. "Officer Reynolds said since there's no clear evidence of who owned her, they're classifying it as a standard stray rescue. Said they're too understaffed to investigate every abandoned dog case." The next morning, after ensuring the puppies were stable, Margot began her own investigation. She sat at her cluttered desk, scrolling through local breeding registries. German shepherds were valuable dogs. Someone must have records of this one. A call to the Tennessee Kennel Club yielded an interesting lead. "Oh, for German shepherds," the clerk said, "you'll want to talk to Orville Granger. He's been breeding champions for 20 years. Has a big operation out on Mill Creek Road." Margot wrote down the name, something nagging at her memory. She'd heard whispers about Granger before, always in hushed tones at veterinary conferences or shelter meetings. His kennels produce some of the most expensive puppies in 3 states, but no one seemed to know much about his breeding stock. She opened her laptop and typed his name into the search bar. Articles popped up showing a tall, silver-haired man accepting awards, shaking hands with local politicians. His website displayed pristine kennels and glossy photos of perfect puppies. Everything looked immaculate, almost too perfect. "Hey, Jenny," Margot called out. "What do you know about Orville Granger?" Jenny appeared in the doorway, her expression changing at the name. "The breeder? My cousin worked for him briefly. Quit after 2 weeks. said something felt off about the place, but wouldn't say what exactly. Why? Margot gestured to her computer screen. Look at these photos. All show puppies and winning dogs. But where are the breeding females? Not a single mother dog in sight. Later that afternoon, Margot took Calypso for a short walk around the shelter grounds. They passed the small barn where they stored hay for their rescue horses. Calypso's reaction was shocking. She froze, then backed away, her whole body rigid with fear. The same thing happened when they neared the tool shed. What happened to you? Margot wondered aloud, watching as Calypso pressed against her legs, seeking comfort. This wasn't just abuse. This was systematic trauma. The fear of men's voices, the reaction to outbuildings, the professional breeding appearance of her puppies despite their condition, it all pointed to something darker. Back inside, Margot started making calls. Several went unreturned. Others ended quickly when she mentioned Granger's name. Finally, a retired vet tech agreed to meet her for coffee the next day, saying only, "There are things you should know, but not over the phone." That evening, as Margot checked on the puppies one last time, she watched Calypso tenderly cleaning each one. The German Shepherd's gentleness with her babies contrasted sharply with the fear and trauma evident in her behavior. Someone had hurt this dog deeply, had tried to break her spirit, but they'd failed. Despite everything, she'd found the courage to escape and the wisdom to seek help. "We're going to figure this out," Margot promised, sitting beside the dog bed. "Whatever happened to you, whoever did this, they're not going to get away with it." Calypso looked up at her with those knowing eyes, and Margot felt the weight of that trust settle onto her shoulders, like a mantle. Margot pulled up to Granger's kennel in her weathered pickup truck, gravel crunching under the tires. The property sprawled across several manicured acres, with pristine white fencing and freshly painted buildings. Everything looked perfect, too perfect. A young woman in crisp khakis greeted her at the office. "Welcome to Granger's Elite Shepherds. Are you interested in our upcoming litter?" "Actually," Margot said, pulling out her business card, "I'm here about your breeding program. I run the Pine Ridge Animal Rescue, and we're updating our resources for responsible breeders." The tour revealed spotless kennels, gleaming medical equipment, and proud ribbons lining the walls. But something felt wrong. The breeding dogs stayed oddly quiet, cowering at the back of their runs. None showed the typical excitement of shepherds meeting visitors. Later that afternoon, in a small coffee shop 20 miles away, Margot met Sarah Chen, a former employee who'd reached out after hearing about Margot's inquiries. "Everything you see there is for show," Sarah whispered, hands trembling around her coffee cup. "The real breeding operation happens in the back buildings, the ones visitors never see." She glanced nervously over her shoulder before continuing. "Dogs that don't produce perfect puppies disappear, and the things they do to the runts." Sarah's words were interrupted by Margot's phone ringing. Jenny's voice came through tight with worry. "You need to get back here. The smallest puppy, he's crashing." Margot broke every speed limit getting back to the shelter. The tiny pup lay limp on the examination table, barely breathing. "Get x-rays," she ordered, helping Jenny position the machine. The images made her blood run cold. Surgical staples lined the puppy's abdomen, recent ones, and blood tests revealed traces of experimental veterinary drugs, the kind used in unauthorized breeding trials. "This isn't standard practice," Jenny said, staring at the results. "This is experimentation." Margot's hands shook as she pulled up Granger's website on her phone. There it was, a litter listed from 3 weeks ago, marked as stillborn, with the same birth date they'd estimated for these puppies. "He reported them dead," Margot said, her voice hard, "then used them for testing. Calypso must have escaped with them before." She couldn't finish the sentence. The next morning, Margot filed formal complaints with the State Breeding Board and Veterinary Association. By afternoon, her phone wouldn't stop ringing. "Ms. Elridge," a smooth voice said, "this is Gerald Winston, representing Mr. Granger's legal interests. These accusations are gravely serious. Without concrete proof, you're risking significant liability. More calls followed. Anonymous voices warning her to mind her own business. A board member suggesting she consider the shelter's future carefully. At midnight, exhausted but unable to sleep, Margot sat with Calypso in the recovery ward. The mother dog rested her head on Margot's lap while watching her puppies sleep. "They thought they could make you and your babies disappear," Margot whispered, scratching behind Calypso's ears. "But they didn't count on how brave you are." Her phone buzzed again, another private number. But this time, a different kind of voice spoke. "I used to work for Granger. I have proof. Meet me tomorrow." Margot looked down at Calypso, seeing the trust in those intelligent eyes. "I'll meet them," she told the dog, "because someone needs to expose what's happening behind those perfect white fences." The smallest puppy stirred in his sleep, his tiny body still fighting to heal from whatever had been done to him. Margot watched him, her jaw set with determination. The surgical staples and chemical traces weren't just evidence of abuse. They were proof of systematic cruelty hiding behind respectability. As she updated her case notes, documenting every detail, more threatening messages filled her inbox. But Margot had spent years in emergency rooms seeing the aftermath of humanity's worst moments. These threats didn't frighten her. They only proved she was getting close to the truth. She looked at the puppy's x-rays again, at the deliberate pattern of those staples. Someone had treated these lives as disposable, as mere test subjects. But they hadn't counted on Calypso's determination to save her babies, or on her finding her way to someone who wouldn't back down. Margot stared at the growing stack of threatening letters on her desk. The local paper had run a story questioning her shelter's practices, clearly planted by Granger's connections. 3 major donors had already pulled their support. "They're trying to starve us out," Jenny said, dropping another handful of mail. "The bank called about our mortgage payment." Margot squared her shoulders. "Then we'll fight smarter." She pulled out her phone and dialed a number she'd been saving. Jude Castillo arrived an hour later, his leather jacket creased and camera bag slung over one shoulder. The former cop turned investigative journalist looked exactly like his reputation, someone who'd seen too much but hadn't lost his fire for justice. "Nice setup you've got here," he said, scanning the shelter's worn but clean facilities. His eyes lingered on Calypso, who watched him warily from her recovery pen. "Tell me everything." Margot laid out the evidence, the surgical staples, the chemical traces, the pattern of vanishing dogs. Jude's expression grew darker with each detail. "Classic signs of a fighting ring," he said, pulling out his notebook. "The experimental drugs, the disposal of defective animals. I've seen this before, but we'll need more than suspicions." "That's why I called you both," Margot said as Dr. Helen Braxley slipped quietly into the office. The veterinary technician looked nervous, constantly adjusting her messy blonde bun. I worked at Golden Paw Kennels last year," Helen said softly. They partner with Granger. I saw things, documents, but I was too scared to speak up then." Jude leaned forward. "What kind of documents?" "Shipping records, dogs being moved at strange hours, and medical logs that didn't match the official records." Helen's hands trembled slightly. "There's a barn on the back property. No one but Granger and his special crew are allowed inside." "That's where we start," Jude said, pulling out specialized surveillance equipment from his camera bag. "These motion-activated cameras are designed for wildlife photography, completely weatherproof, invisible at night." They spent the next hour planning. Helen drew detailed maps of Granger's property, marking staff patterns and blind spots. Jude outlined legal parameters, what evidence would stick, what wouldn't. "We'll need 3 teams," Margot said, spreading out a satellite view of the area. "Helen knows the medical angle. Jude can document everything. I'll coordinate from here and keep the shelter running as cover." That night, under a clouded moon, Jude and Helen placed the first cameras. They worked silently, professional and focused. One device overlooking the suspicious barn's entrance, another watching the private road behind the property, a third monitoring the loading area where Helen had seen mysterious late-night deliveries. "Motion sensors are live," Jude whispered into his phone, where Margot listened from the shelter. "We'll have eyes on everything within 50 yards of that barn." Back at Pine Ridge, Margot created a secure database for their evidence. Her medical training had taught her the importance of meticulous documentation. Every photo, every shipping record Helen had secretly copied, every medical anomaly in the rescued puppies, all carefully logged and backed up. "We need to be careful," Helen warned during their next meeting. "Granger has friends in the police department, in the mayor's office, even at the state level." "That's why we're gathering overwhelming evidence," Jude replied, showing them footage from the first night. Dark vehicles arriving well past midnight, crated animals being moved under cover of darkness. "We'll build a case so solid that even his connections can't bury it." Margot spent her days maintaining a calm facade, running the shelter as if nothing had changed. But every night she worked with her small team, piecing together the dark puzzle of Granger's operation. "Look at this," Helen said one evening, pointing to a medical record. "These birth dates don't match the shipping manifest. He's moving more dogs than he's officially breeding." "Classic sign of illegal fighting operations," Jude confirmed. "They launder fighting dogs through legitimate breeding programs. Makes the money trail harder to follow." Calypso watched their meetings from her bed in the corner, her puppies growing stronger each day. Sometimes Margot caught the dog's intelligent eyes following their work, as if she understood they were fighting for justice. "We're close," Margot told the German Shepherd one quiet evening. "We'll make sure what happened to you never happens to another dog." The surveillance continued, each day bringing new pieces of evidence. Hidden cameras captured patterns of suspicious activity. Helen's insider knowledge helped them interpret what they were seeing. Jude's investigative skills tied it all together. They worked carefully, methodically, building their case in secret while Granger's pressure campaign against the shelter intensified. But Margot refused to back down. Every threat only proved they were on the right track. Every attempt to discredit her work only strengthened her resolve. "We're almost ready," Jude said, reviewing their evidence wall. "Just need to catch them in the act. One clear shot of what goes on in that barn." Margot nodded, watching another threatening letter burn in her office trash can. They had built their net carefully, patiently. Soon it would be time to pull it tight. The morning's mail brought another stack of legal papers. Margot's hand shook as she read through the latest lawsuit. Orville Granger was suing her for $2 million in damages, claiming her malicious lies had destroyed his reputation and business. She collapsed into her office chair, surrounded by unpaid bills and warning notices. The shelter's largest donor had pulled their funding yesterday, citing controversy concerns. 3 other supporters had followed suit. The bank account was nearly empty. "You can't let him win," Helen said from the doorway, her face tight with worry. "That's exactly what he wants." "I know," Margot rubbed her temples. "But he's got the whole town scared. Nobody wants to cross him." A knock interrupted them. Margot's landlord, Tom Wheeler, stood in the doorway clutching an official-looking document. His usually friendly face was drawn and apologetic. "I'm sorry, Margot. I tried to hold them off, but—" He handed her the paper. "It's an eviction notice. 30 days. Margot scanned the document, her heart sinking. "Tom, we've been here 5 years. Never missed a payment until—" "It's not about the money." Tom wouldn't meet her eyes. "Granger's development company just bought the whole property. They're planning some fancy subdivision." He hesitated. "Look, I heard they're offering to drop everything if you just apologize. Say you made a mistake." "A mistake?" Margot's voice cracked. "Those puppies nearly died. Calypso was tortured. That's not a mistake. That's a crime." But after Tom left, doubt crept in. The shelter housed 32 animals. Where would they go? How could she protect them with no money, no building, and her reputation in tatters? She walked through the kennels, checking on each animal. The recovering puppies played in their enclosure, growing stronger every day. But Calypso's bed was empty. Calypso! Margot searched every room, panic rising. The German Shepherd was gone. She must have slipped out during morning walks, Helen said, helping her search the grounds. Should we call animal control? No. Margot remembered how the local officers had dismissed her concerns before. She'll come back. She wouldn't abandon her puppies. But as night fell, there was still no sign of Calypso. Margot stayed late, unable to leave, while one of her charges was missing. She sat in her office, staring at the eviction notice, wondering if she should just give up. A scratch at the door startled her. Calypso stood there, panting heavily. Something dark dangled from her mouth. "Oh, thank God," Margot breathed, rushing to check the dog for injuries. "Where have you?" She stopped short. Calypso dropped what she was carrying, a leather leash, expensive looking, but torn and stained with blood. The dog's eyes held Margot's gaze with fierce intelligence. "You went back there, didn't you?" Margot whispered, examining the leash. It had a fancy brass nameplate, partially obscured by dirt and blood. She cleaned it carefully, revealing an engraving. "Property of Golden Paw Kennels." Helen's words echoed in her mind. They partner with Granger. Calypso hadn't run away. She'd gone hunting for evidence. Despite everything she'd suffered, she was still fighting back, still trying to expose the truth. Margot pulled out her phone and called Jude. "Get over here. Now bring your camera." While they waited, she hugged Calypso close, burying her face in the dog's fur. "You're right, girl. We can't give up. Not when you're still fighting." Jude arrived with his forensics camera, carefully photographing and bagging the leash. "This is physical evidence linking Golden Paw to whatever happened to her. We can get DNA testing." "Do it," Margot said firmly. "And call your contacts at the state paper. It's time to go public with what we know." She looked around her office, at the eviction notice, the lawsuit, the canceled donation letters. Yesterday, these had seemed like defeat. Now they were proof that Granger was running scared. "He can take this building," she told Helen and Jude. "He can drain our accounts and trash my name. But he can't stop us from telling the truth." Calypso settled into her bed, checking on her puppies before falling asleep. Her work was done. She'd shown them the way forward. Margot pinned the evidence photos to their investigation board. The bloody leash joined surveillance photos, medical records, and Helen's testimony. Soon, very soon, they would have enough to bring it all crashing down. "No more playing defense," she said. "Tomorrow, we start fighting back." Jude Castillo squinted at his laptop screen, his weathered face illuminated by its blue glow. Empty coffee cups littered his desk at the shelter's makeshift command center, what used to be Margot's storage closet. The bloody leash lay sealed in an evidence bag beside him. "Come look at this," he called out, waving Margot over. "I've been running Calypso's chip number through different databases. Most came up empty, but I just got a hit in an old police archive." Margot leaned over his shoulder, Calypso padding quietly behind her. The German Shepherd's ears perked up at the sound of her name. "K9 Unit 473, Jude read aloud. "Assigned to the Metro Nashville Police Department's Special Operations Division." He clicked through several documents. She wasn't just any police dog, she was decorated. Multiple citations for drug busts and suspect apprehension. "That explains her training," Margot said softly, reaching down to scratch behind Calypso's ears. "But how did she end up with Granger?" Jude's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Here's where it gets strange. According to official records, she was killed in action 2 years ago during a drug raid gone wrong." He pulled up a scanned incident report. "Says here she was shot while pursuing suspects, and her body was never recovered." Calypso whined softly, pressing against Margot's leg. Very much alive, despite what the papers claimed. "Let me see that report." Margot studied the document. "Who was her handler?" "Officer James Martinez." Jude typed the name into another database. "Currently on administrative leave pending an internal affairs investigation. Unrelated charges of evidence tampering." Helen burst through the door, waving a manila envelope. The DNA results came back on the blood from the leash. It's not Calypso's. It matches another German Shepherd, likely one of Granger's breeding dogs. Cross-reference everything, Margot instructed, pacing the small room. Dates, locations, anything that connects Martinez to Granger. Jude worked in silence for several minutes, only the click of keys and Calypso's steady breathing filling the room. Suddenly, he sat up straight. Got something. 3 months before Calypso's supposed death, Martinez responded to a noise complaint at one of Granger's properties. No citation issued. He dug deeper. Then 2 more calls over the next month. Each time, Martinez was the responding officer. Each time, no official action taken. He was on Granger's payroll, Margot realized. Building a relationship. It gets worse, Jude continued. The night of the raid, Martinez was lead officer. His body cam mysteriously malfunctioned right before Calypso allegedly got shot. The backup unit arrived 3 minutes later, just long enough to stage a scene. Calypso moved to the evidence bag containing her old leash, nosing it gently. Her dark eyes seemed to hold volumes of unspoken testimony. They sold her, Margot whispered, anger threading through her voice. A decorated police dog falsified her death and sold her into abuse. This isn't just animal cruelty anymore. This is corruption, fraud, misuse of government property. Federal crimes, Jude finished, which means federal jurisdiction. Granger's local influence won't mean much to the FBI. Helen, who had been quietly taking notes, looked up. What about the other dogs? If they did this to Calypso, how many more? Pull everything, Margot ordered. Every K9 unit death in the past 5 years. Every handler investigated for misconduct. Every connection to Granger or Golden Paw Kennels. Jude was already typing. I've got contacts at the FBI field office in Nashville. Once we present this evidence, the falsified reports, the DNA, Calypso herself, they'll have to investigate. We'll need protection, Helen pointed out. Once they realize what we've uncovered. Already on it, Jude held up his phone. I've got everything backed up to secure servers. If anything happens to us or this evidence, it automatically goes to every major news outlet in the state. Margot knelt beside Calypso, who had settled into her usual watchful position by the door. You did more than save your puppies, didn't you, girl? You're going to help us save others, too. The German Shepherd's tail thumped once against the floor, her eyes never leaving Margot's face. Despite everything she'd endured, the betrayal, the abuse, the separation from her puppies, she had never lost her drive to serve and protect. Start making calls, Margot told Jude. I want federal agents here by morning. It's time to show everyone who Orville Granger really is, and who helped him get away with it for so long. Agent Lennox Dawes stood motionless, studying the blueprints spread across Margot's office desk. His plain, dark suit and stern expression contrasted sharply with the cheerful animal photos decorating the walls. The barn's primary entrance faces north, he said, tracing a line with his finger. Security cameras here, here, and here. 2 emergency exits on the east side, loading dock to the west. His voice carried the steady precision of someone who had orchestrated dozens of similar operations. Margot leaned forward, Calypso alert at her side. What about the basement level? That's where they'll hold the main event. Agent Dawes pointed to a section of the blueprint marked in red. According to our intelligence, Granger scheduled a private breeding consultation for Saturday night. Guest list includes known figures from fight rings in 3 states. Jude spread out surveillance photos across another table. We've identified at least 4 other former K9 units among Granger's current stock, all officially listed as deceased in the line of duty. Just like Calypso, Helen added softly, scratching behind the German Shepherd's ears. Agent Dawes nodded grimly. We've been building a case against several corrupt handlers, but Granger's operation is the missing link. These auctions are where police dogs get funneled into private collections or fighting rings. How many buyers are we expecting? Margot asked, studying the barn's layout. Intelligence suggests between 15 and 20 high-level participants. Dawes pulled out his phone, showing them a series of mugshots. These three are our primary targets, known fight ring operators from Georgia and Kentucky. They'll be carrying significant cash for the auction. Helen sorted through medical records spread across her lap. I've prepared detailed files on all the dogs we suspect were stolen from police departments. DNA samples, medical histories, distinguishing marks. Good, Dawes replied. We'll need clear identification to make the trafficking charges stick. Jude looked up from his laptop. I've got our cover stories ready. Helen and I will pose as buyers from Mississippi. Credentials are ironclad. Margot, you're registered as a veterinary consultant. What about Calypso? Margot glanced at the German Shepherd. She knows that property better than any of us. Too risky, Dawes said firmly. She's evidence. If Granger spots her, the whole operation could be compromised. Calypso growled softly, as if disagreeing with the assessment. The FBI will have teams positioned here, here, and here. Dawes marked positions on the blueprint with red dots. Once we confirm the presence of stolen K9 units and document an illegal sale, we move in. Priority is securing the animals and preventing any suspects from destroying evidence. Margot studied the tactical plan. What about Martinez? Will he be there? Our sources say yes. Granger uses him to verify the authenticity of police dogs up for auction. Having a current officer present makes buyers feel secure. Helen organized her medical kit, checking supplies. I've prepared sedatives and first aid equipment. Some of these dogs might be injured or aggressive from their training. Remember, Dawes emphasized, your primary role is observation and documentation. Get photos, record conversations, but do not engage directly unless absolutely necessary. We need this evidence to be legally admissible. Jude held up several tiny cameras disguised as buttons and tie clips. Everything will be transmitted live to the FBI command center. If anything goes wrong, they'll know immediately. What about backup? Margot asked, concerned about the scale of the operation. 3 tactical teams on standby, plus local law enforcement units we've personally vetted. Dawes' expression hardened. Only officers we're certain aren't compromised. They spent the next hour reviewing emergency protocols and communication signals. Calypso watched them intently, moving between team members as if conducting her own inspection. One more thing, Dawes added, pulling out a thick envelope. Federal warrants for every property owned by Granger or his shell companies. Once the auction is broken up, we move immediately to search all locations. No time for anyone to hide evidence. Margot picked up a small photo that had fallen from the blueprints, a satellite image of Granger's barn. Something about the loading dock caught her eye. Agent Dawes, look at this. She pointed to a dark line running along the west wall. That's not on the blueprint. Dawes examined the image closely. Good catch. Looks like a recently installed drainage system. Could be an escape route. I'll add it to the tactical overlay, Jude said, updating his digital maps. Helen finished organizing her medical supplies and stood up. We should do one final walkthrough of our cover stories. The smallest slip could give us away. Agreed. Dawes checked his watch. We have 48 hours until the auction. Let's run it again from the beginning. As they reviewed their roles, Calypso moved to the window, staring intently in the direction of Granger's property. Her posture was alert but calm, like she knew justice was finally coming. Margot watched her former K9 officer with a mix of pride and determination. 2 days, she whispered. 2 days, and we shut him down for good. The team worked late into the night, perfecting every detail. Their parts in the operation were set. Now they just had to wait for Saturday night, when they would finally expose the dark truth behind Orville Granger's respected facade. The auction barn buzzed with quiet tension. Margot adjusted her blonde wig and touched the hidden wire beneath her blazer, scanning the crowd of well-dressed buyers. Through her earpiece, she heard Agent Dawes' steady voice. Cameras are live. Remember your signals. Orville Granger worked the room like a politician, his silver hair catching the light as he moved from group to group. His charm masked something cold in his eyes, something that made Margot's skin crawl even from across the room. "Lot listings are being distributed," Jude murmured through the wire. He stood near the entrance, posing as a wealthy broker. "Underground access point confirmed." Margot accepted a printed catalog from a stern-faced assistant, her heart racing as she glimpsed the coded descriptions. German lines, proven producers, retired champions, euphemisms for stolen and abused animals. The first hour crawled by as lesser lots were presented. Margot bid cautiously on 2 dogs, maintaining her cover while hidden cameras captured every transaction. Her hands shook as she documented the evidence, knowing what waited below. "Moving to Phase 2, Dawes whispered in her ear. "Basement access in 3 minutes." Right on cue, Granger announced a brief intermission before the premium offerings. Buyers murmured excitedly, following their host toward the tack room. Margot fell into step with the group, forcing herself to appear casual despite her pounding heart. The hidden kennels shocked even their worst expectations. Steel cages lined concrete walls, holding dozens of dogs, far more than their estimates. Many wore embedded chains like Calypso's, their eyes showing the same haunted look. Margot recognized several as reported deceased K9 officers. "My God!" Helen's voice cracked through the earpiece. "There are at least 30 down here." Granger began his practice speech about specialized training and exclusive bloodlines. Margot positioned herself near the back, pretending to examine papers while photographing cage numbers with her hidden camera. That's when everything exploded into chaos. "Federal agents?" Dawes' voice boomed through the basement. Doors burst open as tactical teams swarmed in from multiple entries. "Everyone on the ground, now!" Buyers scattered like startled birds. Granger's face transformed from smooth charm to murderous rage in an instant. "Kill the lights!" he shouted, reaching for something in his jacket. Darkness crashed down, broken by flashlight beams and the thunder of footsteps. Dogs barked in a deafening chorus. Margot pressed herself against a wall, heart hammering as shapes rushed past her in the darkness. A hand grabbed her throat, shoving her backward. "You!" a voice growled. "Martinez, the corrupt officer who had betrayed Calypso. I knew something was wrong about you." His grip tightened. Margot struggled, but he was too strong. Spots danced in her vision as she fought for air. A snarl ripped through the chaos, familiar and fierce. Something large and fast hit Martinez like a missile, sending them both crashing to the ground. Calypso, who had been waiting with the tactical team, had her former handler pinned, teeth bared inches from his throat. "Hold!" Dawes shouted, his flashlight beam finding them. "Nobody move!" Martinez froze, terror replacing rage as he stared up at the dog he had sold into torture. Calypso held him without wavering, a low growl rumbling in her chest. "Calypso," Margot called hoarsely, rubbing her throat. "Guard only!" The German shepherd maintained her hold, but eased the pressure slightly. Her message was clear. She remembered everything, but she would not sink to his level. Lights flickered back on. The scene resolved into sharp focus. Agents securing suspects, Helen and her medical team rushing to the kennels. Granger face down in handcuffs as Dawes read him his rights. "Multiple weapons recovered," an agent reported, including loaded firearms near the main entrance. They were going to kill the dogs if the raid went wrong, Jude realized, checking his camera footage. "We got here just in time." Margot knelt beside Calypso, who still had Martinez firmly pinned. "Good girl," she whispered. "You can let the agents take him now." The dog held position until federal officers had Martinez in custody, then pressed against Margot's leg, trembling slightly. The trauma in her past had not broken her spirit. It had forged it into something unbreakable. 37 dogs recovered, Helen called out, moving from kennel to kennel, including 6 confirmed police K9s, all alive, all requiring immediate medical attention. Dawes approached Margot, nodding approval. "Outstanding work. We have everything we need. Financial records, surveillance footage, multiple witnesses. This operation is finished. Margot watched as medical teams began carefully removing dogs from their cages. Each animal would need extensive rehabilitation, but they would survive. They would heal. "Agent," a technical officer called urgently, "you need to see this." Dawes' expression darkened as he examined something on the officer's phone. He turned to Margot, his voice grim. "This isn't over. We found evidence of a larger network, breeding operations in 3 other states." Margot felt her momentary triumph fade. Their victory here was real, but incomplete. Like a hydra, cut off one head and more appeared. How many other dogs like Calypso were still out there, waiting to be saved? The morning after the raid, Margot's triumph turned to ash in her mouth. Jude's call came at 6:15. "Granger made bail," he said, his voice tight with anger. $500,000 posted within hours. Margot gripped her coffee mug so hard her knuckles went white. "How?" This was federal charges, trafficking across state lines. Money talks, and he's got friends in high places. Jude's exhaustion carried through the phone. His lawyers are already spinning it as a misunderstanding, claiming he had no knowledge of the illegal activities. She was about to respond when a commotion from the clinic caught her attention. Helen's voice rang out, urgent and sharp. "Margot, get in here now." Calypso lay on her side in the examination room, breathing labored. Helen worked quickly, checking vitals while explaining in clipped sentences. "Internal bleeding. Old injuries we didn't catch. The stress of the raid must have—" "No," Margot whispered, dropping to her knees beside the German Shepherd. Calypso's eyes found hers, still alert despite the pain. Those eyes held such intelligence, such determination. Even now, they showed more concern for others than herself. The next 48 hours became a blur of IV drips, blood tests, and desperate measures. Margot barely left Calypso's side, sleeping on a cot beside the examination table. The puppies, now strong enough to walk, crowded around their mother whenever allowed, sensing something was wrong. Jude came by with coffee and updates. The media was starting to pick up the story, but Granger's PR machine was in full swing. He'd given interviews claiming persecution, playing the decorated veteran card. "We have the footage," Jude reminded her. "All of it. But if we release it now, his lawyers could claim we're poisoning the jury pool." Margot stroked Calypso's head, feeling the weak thump of her tail. She doesn't have time for legal strategies. On the 3rd morning, Calypso's condition worsened dramatically. Her breathing became shallow, each breath a visible struggle. The puppies whimpered, pressing close to their mother's warmth. "The internal damage was too extensive," Helen explained gently. "Years of abuse, multiple untreated injuries. She's been running on pure willpower." Margot nodded, tears falling freely now. She held on long enough to save them all. Her puppies, the other dogs, even me. Throughout the day, shelter staff came to say goodbye. Calypso acknowledged each one with a gentle look or a slight tail wag. Her puppies remained close, instinctively understanding these were final moments. As sunset painted the clinic walls in soft orange light, Calypso's breathing changed. Margot held her head in her lap, whispering softly, "You did it, sweet girl. You won. They're all safe now." With one final peaceful sigh, Calypso slipped away. Her face was serene, free at last from pain and fear. The puppies huddled closer, small whines filling the quiet room. Grief hit Margot like a physical blow, but underneath it burned a fierce determination. She called Jude immediately. "Release everything," she said, her voice raw but steady. "All the footage, all the evidence. I don't care about jury pools anymore. The public needs to see the truth." Jude didn't hesitate. "I'll have it uploaded within the hour." The response exceeded their wildest expectations. By midnight, the footage had gone viral. Major news networks picked up the story, running the most damning clips on repeat. Calypso's journey, from decorated K-9 officer to abuse survivor to heroic mother, captured hearts nationwide. Social media exploded with outrage. The justice for Calypso trended globally. Former employees of Granger's operation came forward with new evidence. Other shelters across the country reported similar trafficking patterns, suggesting a nationwide network. Margot watched it unfold from the clinic, surrounded by Calypso's puppies. Their presence both sharpened her grief and strengthened her resolve. These innocent lives, saved by their mother's courage, would grow up in a world where such cruelty faced real consequences. Public pressure mounted. Senators called for investigations into K-9 trafficking. Police departments nationwide began auditing their retired dog programs. Animal welfare organizations reported unprecedented donation surges, all in Calypso's name. "She's still saving lives," Jude said softly, showing Margot the latest coverage. "Her story is changing things." Margot nodded, watching the strongest puppy, a female with her mother's intelligent eyes, attempting to comfort her siblings. She always knew exactly what needed to be done, even at the end. The national attention brought new scrutiny to Granger's case. His carefully crafted image crumbled under the weight of public outrage and mounting evidence. His allies began distancing themselves, unwilling to be caught in the backlash. Calypso's sacrifice had torn away the veil of respectability that had protected monsters like Granger for too long. In death, as in life, she fought for those who couldn't fight for themselves. Agent Lennox Dawes stood at Margot's door in the early morning light, his normally stoic expression softened by a hint of satisfaction. The footage changed everything. "We have over 50 new witnesses willing to testify." Margot invited him inside the shelter's office, where the walls were now covered with letters and cards from supporters across the country. "How solid is the case this time?" "Ironclad," Dawes replied, laying out documents on her desk. "Interstate trafficking, conspiracy, corruption of public officials. The FBI's Organized Crime Division is involved now. Granger's network crossed state lines, which makes this federal." Through the window, Margot could see Calypso's puppies playing in their outdoor enclosure. They had grown strong and healthy, their mother's fighting spirit evident in their resilient personalities. "We're moving in today," Dawes continued. "Multiple locations, simultaneous raids. Granger won't see it coming." The arrest made national news. Cameras captured Granger being led from his pristine farmhouse in handcuffs, his carefully maintained facade crumbling. This time, there would be no bail. The evidence was too overwhelming, the public outcry too loud to ignore. The court proceedings stretched over weeks. Margot attended every day, watching as former employees testified about the horrors they'd witnessed. Veterinarians presented evidence of systematic abuse. Police officers admitted to looking the other way. With each testimony, the full scope of Granger's operation became clear. On the day of the verdict, the courtroom was packed. Margot sat with Jude and Helen, holding her breath as the judge addressed the court. The evidence presented in this case reveals not just individual acts of cruelty, but a systematic enterprise of exploitation, the judge declared. The defendant's actions represent a betrayal of public trust and a perversion of the special bond between humans and working animals. The sentence came down hard: 20 years in federal prison, millions in fines, and a lifetime ban on animal ownership. Granger's face turned ashen as he was led away. His empire of cruelty had finally crumbled. In the months that followed, Margot channeled the nationwide support into something permanent. With donations and grants pouring in, she purchased a 30-acre property outside town. The Calypso K-9 Sanctuary opened its doors 6 months after the trial. "This place is special," Margot explained to a local reporter during the opening ceremony. "Every dog here has a story of service and sacrifice. Police dogs, military dogs, search and rescue. They give everything to help humans. They deserve a retirement filled with love and dignity." The sanctuary quickly became known for its specialized care of former working dogs. Veterinarians studied their rehabilitation methods. Other shelters sought their advice. The puppies, now nearly grown, found homes with carefully selected families who understood their unique heritage. Margot kept the smallest female, the one with her mother's eyes. She named her Hope, and the dog became a living reminder of Calypso's legacy. Together, they greeted each new rescue, showing them that second chances were possible. In Margot's office, Calypso's photo held the place of honor. It was taken that first night when the injured shepherd had appeared at the shelter's gates. Her eyes seemed to look directly into the camera, pleading not for herself, but for her puppies and all the other animals who needed help. "You started something bigger than any of us," Margot often whispered to the photo. The changes rippled outward. New laws protecting working dogs, stricter oversight of breeding operations, better support for animal welfare investigations. 1 year after Calypso's death, Margot organized a memorial service that doubled as a celebration of the sanctuary's success. Hundreds attended, including many of the families who had adopted rescued dogs. Agent Dawes came, standing quietly at the back as Margot addressed the crowd. "Calypso showed us that courage doesn't always roar," she said, her voice carrying across the gathered faces. "Sometimes it's a mother's quiet determination to save her children. Sometimes it's the willingness to trust again after betrayal. And sometimes it's the simple act of leading someone to the truth, even when that path is dangerous." Hope sat at her feet, tail wagging gently as former K-9 officers and their partners shared stories of service and sacrifice. The sanctuary had become more than just a shelter. It was a testament to the unbreakable bonds between humans and dogs, and a promise that such bonds would be honored and protected. As the sun set on that gathering, Margot watched the sanctuary's newest residents settling into their forever homes. Each dog carried their own history of service and survival, but here they found peace. In saving them, she honored Calypso's memory in the most fitting way possible, by ensuring that no other dog would suffer as she had. The framed photo caught the last rays of sunlight, those eyes still watching, still guiding. Calypso's story had transformed from tragedy to triumph, her courage inspiring a movement that would protect generations of dogs to come. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.